The radio crackles, a single sharp burst of static. In the suffocating, diesel-scented darkness of the maintenance van, the sound is a gunshot. Ehud Barak does not flinch. His eyes, accustomed to the low light of countless pre-dawn operations, are fixed on the luminous tritium dial of his watch. The second hand sweeps past the 21:19. Outside, 300 meters away across a desolate expanse of tarmac, illuminated by the harsh sodium-yellow glare of airport floodlights, sits Sabena Flight 571, a Boeing 707-329, registration OOSJG. It holds 90 passengers, 10 crew members, and 4 hijackers from the Black September organization, a radical splinter group of the PLO. For 30 agonizing hours, the aircraft has been a powder keg on the tarmac of Lod Airport, Israel's primary international gateway. Negotiations, a deliberate exercise in misdirection and delay, have stalled. The hijackers' final, absolute deadline passed 10 minutes ago. Their demand is unwavering: the release of 317 convicted Palestinian militants from Israeli prisons. The Israeli government's public position, articulated by Prime Minister Golda Meir, is a cornerstone of national security doctrine. We do not negotiate with terrorists. The private reality is a storm of frantic, desperate options being debated in a converted airport fire station serving as the forward command post. Barak listens not to the radio, but to the profound, unnatural silence that follows the static. The silence is the problem. It means the control tower has not received the next scheduled threat. It means the hijackers are breaking their own pattern. They are waiting, or planning, or worse, arguing amongst themselves. An unstable element is the most dangerous variable in any tactical equation, capable of collapsing the entire operational structure. His team, 17 men handpicked from Sayeret Matkal, the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, and the most elite Special Forces entity in the IDF, are crammed into this van, and 2 identical ones parked nearby. They are not wearing combat fatigues or tactical gear. They are dressed in the grease-stained white overalls of Sabena Airlines aircraft mechanics, sourced that afternoon from the airline's own locker rooms. Their tools are not wrenches and screwdrivers. They are .22 caliber Beretta Model 71 pistols, nicknamed the Quiet One, fitted with rudimentary white-based suppressors. The weapon was chosen after extensive testing by the unit's armorers. The low-velocity .22 long rifle round is less likely to over-penetrate, reducing the risk of hitting a hostage on the other side of a target. More critically, it is less likely to puncture the plane's thin aluminum skin and cause a catastrophic explosive decompression, a moot point on the ground with the cabin unpressurized. But procedure, born from 1,000 drills, is procedure. Each man also carries 2 spare 8-round magazines and a custom-made, narrow-bladed pry tool forged from high-tensile steel, designed for the over-wing emergency exits. The plan, codenamed Operation Isotope, is balanced on a razor's edge. It is predicated on a lie. A very simple, very bold lie. The hijackers have been informed by the control tower that the aircraft's hydraulic and pneumatic systems are failing after 30 hours of inactivity on the ground with engines off. Key components are losing pressure, the tires are deflating, and the landing gear struts are at risk of collapse. A maintenance crew must be allowed to approach to service the plane, or it will become an unmovable, unflyable prison. The leader of the cell, Ali Taha Abu Snina, has provisionally agreed. But he is not a fool. The slightest deviation from the expected routine, the glint of a weapon, a single misplaced step, and he detonates the bomb wired to a dead man's switch, clutched in his hand. Barak's thumb rests on the transmit button of his own radio, a modified VHF IARC 114 unit operating on a secure, frequency-hopping channel. His orders are to wait for the final go code, Jaffa, from the command post, where the Minister of Defense, Mossad, is monitoring the situation. But the silence stretches. 21:20. Each second is an eternity of calculated risk. The men around him are perfectly still, their breathing disciplined into shallow, inaudible sips of air. One of them, a young squad leader named Benjamin Netanyahu, makes a minute adjustment to the leather strap of his pistol's holster. He is the only one who has moved in 3 minutes. The intelligence they possess is dangerously imperfect, stitched together from frantic radio intercepts, a debrief of a single released passenger, and the coded messages from the heroic pilot, Captain Reginald Levy. They know there are 4 hijackers, 2 men, 2 women. They believe the bomb is real, likely composed of 2 belts of plastic explosives wired in series to a single detonator. They do not know the exact seating arrangement of the passengers or the precise second-to-second location of each hijacker within the cabin. The plan requires them to breach 5 separate entry points, the 2 overwing emergency exits on each side and the forward galley door simultaneously. The window for a synchronized breach is under 3 seconds. From breach to neutralization of all threats, the target is 90 seconds. A second over, and the bomb likely goes off. A second under is a physical impossibility. The static crackles again. A voice, not the go code. It's from the command post, but it's a frantic, distorted whisper from David Elazar, the IDF Chief of Staff. Stand by. Tower has a new communication. He's changing the terms. Repeat, he is changing the terms. Barak's blood runs cold. A change now. The lie about the failing hydraulics was the key, the fulcrum upon which the entire operation pivoted. If the hijackers retract their permission for the maintenance crew to approach, the operation is dead. The only remaining options are to capitulate and release the prisoners, shattering Israel's security doctrine, or to storm the plane blind. A suicide mission that would guarantee mass casualties. He can feel the weight of 17 lives in his van, and 90 more on that plane. The fate of the nation's policy of non-negotiation rests on this single moment. The silence returns, heavier this time, suffocating. 21:21. Dayan and Elazar are listening to the hijacker's voice, relayed from the control tower. The demand is new, completely unexpected. He wants fuel. Now. He wants to see the fuel tanker approaching the aircraft as proof that his demands for a flight to Cairo are being met. If he doesn't see the tanker in 5 minutes, he will execute a passenger. The lie about the failing hydraulics has been exposed as a delaying tactic. The clock has been reset, and it is shorter and more brutal than ever. Barak knows none of this. He only knows the plan is stalled on the precipice of execution. He faces a choice that will define his career. He can wait for an order that may now never come, an order that is likely being rescinded as he sits there. Or he can force the issue. He can start the van's engine, begin the slow, deliberate roll toward the aircraft, and bet everything on 2 critical assumptions. That the hijackers will see what they were told to expect, a maintenance crew, and that Dayan, seeing the plan in irreversible motion, will be forced to give the go code rather than abort mid-action and reveal the ruse to the world. It is the single greatest gamble of his military career. He raises the radio to his lips. His thumb tightens on the button. The story of those 90 seconds does not begin on the tarmac. It begins with a geopolitical chess game, a catastrophic intelligence failure, and a man in a cheap Brussels apartment. Phase 1, the genesis. The intelligence file lands on the desk of Zvi Zamir, the director of Mossad, in February 1972. It is not a single coherent report, but a mosaic of disparate intercepts from the Signals Intelligence Unit 8200, summaries from field agents, CATSAs, and high-altitude satellite photographs of training camps in Lebanon. It paints a picture not of a single threat, but of a systemic and dangerous escalation. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, had turned international air travel into a theater of war. The 1970 Dawson's Field hijackings saw 3 jets forced to land in the Jordanian desert and detonated on camera. A global spectacle of Western impotence. In response, Israeli airline El Al had hardened its aircraft into veritable fortresses. Cockpit doors were reinforced with steel plates capable of stopping a 7.62mm rifle round. Armed, plain-clothed air marshals, all veterans of IDF Special Forces, were placed on every flight. But other international carriers, fearing the loss of passenger revenue and escalating insurance costs, remained soft targets. The file on Zamir's desk detailed the activities of a new, more radical splinter group. They called themselves Black September, a name commemorating their brutal expulsion from Jordan by King Hussein's army in 1970. They were more secretive, more ruthless, and funded by a complex web of shell corporations and direct financial support from state actors like Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. Their operational leader was a man known only by his nom de guerre, Abu Iyad. He was a phantom, a man with no verifiable photographs, no known habits, no exploitable weaknesses. His strategy was bold: to shift the battleground directly onto Israeli soil or against high-profile Israeli assets abroad, forcing the government into a series of impossible, politically damaging choices. The immediate intelligence pointed to a new cell operating out of Brussels, Belgium. The agent reports were thin. The cell leader was believed to be Ali Taha Abu Snina, a veteran of the Jordanian conflict. He was disciplined, a true believer radicalized by the loss of his family home in Hebron in 1967. His file contained a single, grainy photograph taken by a Belgian police informant. He was of medium height, with a thick mustache and eyes that seemed to hold a permanent, simmering anger. The asset who provided the photo, codenamed Gilbert, noted that Snina was meticulous. He didn't drink. He didn't socialize. He spent his days at the Royal Library of Belgium, studying airport layouts and airline schedules. Specifically, Sabini, the Belgian national airline. This was the first critical piece of the puzzle. Sabina Flight 571 was a routine flight from Brussels to Tel Aviv, with a stopover in Vienna. It was popular with tourists, Orthodox Jewish pilgrims, and Israeli families living abroad. It was a perfect soft target. The mission to stop it began not with a military plan, but with a quiet, high-stakes intelligence operation. The key figure in this was a Mossad Katza named Amos Levin. Levin was not a commando. He was 45 years old, a former history professor at Hebrew University, recruited for his uncanny ability to analyze patterns and build human networks. His greatest success was the 1966 operation, codenamed Operation Diamond, to acquire a MiG-21 fighter jet, then the Soviet Union's most advanced interceptor, from Iraq. He did it not with money, but by understanding the Iraqi pilot's psychology, his disillusionment with the Ba'athist regime, his fears for his family, and his professional pride. Levin was a master of the human element. He was dispatched to Brussels under the cover of being a diamond merchant, a common and plausible cover in the city's large Jewish community. His mission: to penetrate Snina's cell and provide early warning of their plan. He reactivated the informant, Gilbert, a low-level smuggler who occasionally moved packages for Palestinian student groups. Gilbert was terrified. Black September had a reputation for extreme paranoia and brutal internal discipline. A single mistake would not just get him fired. It would get him executed in a back alley. Levin calmed him, not with threats, but with cold, irrefutable logic. He laid out the financial incentives, the promise of a new identity and passport in Canada, a future free from this world of shadows. He provided Gilbert with a piece of technology developed by Mossad's tech division, Unit 81. It was a simple key fob for a Ford Cortina, indistinguishable from thousands of others. But inside was a microtransmitter with a limited range of 500 meters. By clicking the button once, he could signal that a meeting was taking place. 2 clicks meant he had critical intelligence and needed an immediate dead drop. 3 clicks was the panic button. It meant he was compromised, and Levin's own network was to immediately disperse. For 2 agonizing months, the operation yielded only fragments. Gilbert reported on meetings in cafes near the Grand Place, on the arrival of 2 new cell members from a training camp in Lebanon, a man and a woman. He couldn't get close enough to hear their plans, only to observe their movements. They were purchasing detailed maps of Vienna International Airport. They were studying the passenger manifests for Sabina flights. The picture was becoming clearer, but it lacked the final, actionable detail: the date of the attack. The geopolitical chessboard was in turmoil. In Egypt, Anwar Sadat was consolidating power, making quiet overtures to the West, while publicly rattling his saber at Israel. In Lebanon, the PLO was operating as a state within a state, launching cross-border raids that provoked heavy-handed Israeli reprisals. The Nixon administration in the United States was pushing for a détente, trying to calm the region, and an event like a major hijacking would shatter the fragile peace process. The pressure on Zamir and the Israeli government was immense. They were fighting a multi-front war, and the front was now expanding to the airports of Europe. Worse, resources were stretched thin. Mossad was concurrently tracking a separate PFLP cell in Rome, believed to be planning an attack on an El Al cargo facility, while military intelligence was preoccupied with a significant Syrian armored buildup along the Golan Heights, forcing the IDF High Command to divert reconnaissance assets, including the new Mastiff surveillance drones. The Brussels operation was considered important, but it was one of 3 active, high-priority threats. The genesis of the military option, should Levin's intelligence operation fail, was handed to the IDF's Chief of Staff, David Elazar, a man known as Dado. Elazar was a pragmatist. He knew that a successful hijacking culminating in capitulation would be a political catastrophe, emboldening every radical group in the region. He tasked Sayeret Matkal, the unit responsible for the military's most sensitive and daring operations, to begin contingency planning. The unit's commander was Ehud Barak. At 30 years old, Barak was already a legend within the IDF. He was a paradox, a kibbutz-raised intellectual with a master's degree in physics who possessed the cold lethality of a born warrior. He approached every problem with the dispassionate logic of a mathematician solving an equation. This mindset was forged in the crucible of operations like the one in Beirut just months prior. A high-value PLO target had to be eliminated. The target lived on the 5th floor of a heavily guarded apartment building. A frontal assault was suicide. Barak's solution was unconventional. He and 2 other members of his team disguised themselves as women, wearing wigs, dresses, and carrying purses filled with suppressed pistols and grenades. They walked arm in arm with other Matkal operators dressed as their boyfriends through the Beirut streets, past PLO checkpoints, their casual demeanor a perfect camouflage. Reaching the building, they eliminated the guards with silent efficiency and ascended to the target's apartment. The memory was a flash of disconnected images. The click of the lockpick, the smell of cardamom coffee from inside, the surprised look on the target's face, the soft cough of the suppressed Beretta. No shouting, no chaos, just a problem, a variable, and a solution. He brought that same cold analysis to the hijacking problem. He requested the complete technical schematics for a Boeing 707 from Israeli aircraft industries. He and his team spent weeks in a hangar with a decommissioned 707, learning every inch of the aircraft. They memorized the thickness of the fuselage skin at different points, the precise location of hydraulic lines and electrical conduits, the locking mechanisms of the cargo doors and emergency exits. They discovered a critical, undocumented vulnerability. The emergency overwing exits could be forced open from the outside. By applying sharp, targeted pressure to a specific point on the door's frame with a specialized pry tool, the internal release handle would pop open. This was a design feature for ground rescue crews, but for them, it was a key into a locked fortress. They built a full-scale wooden mock-up of the 707's cabin in their base at Sierra 17. They drilled endlessly, practicing entries from multiple points, timing their movements to the fraction of a second with stopwatches. They used live ammunition on the firing range, practicing headshots on targets placed next to hostage dummies, learning to shoot with surgical precision under extreme stress, with their heart rates artificially elevated through physical exertion. The plan they developed was audacious. It relied on deception, speed, and overwhelming force applied at a single, precise moment. But it was still just a theory, a set of actions on a whiteboard. It needed a trigger. The trigger came on May 7, 1972. Amos Levin was in his sterile Brussels apartment when he received 2 clicks from Gilbert's key fob. It was the signal for an urgent dead drop. The location was a public library, the method classic espionage tradecraft. Gilbert would leave a hollowed-out book, a French edition of The Count of Monte Cristo, on a specific shelf in the history section. Levin would retrieve it minutes later. Levin arrived at the library. He found the book. Inside, a single folded piece of paper. The message was short, written in frantic, barely legible handwriting. Sabina 571. Tomorrow, Vienna stopover. 4 members. 2 men, 2 women. Explosives confirmed. This was it. The actionable intelligence. But as Levin turned to leave, he saw 2 men in dark trench coats enter the library. They did not browse the shelves. Their eyes were methodically scanning the room, their movements economical and professional. Levin's training took over. He did not run. He walked calmly to a different section, picked up a random book on Flemish art, and sat down at a carrel, his back to the wall. He watched them in the reflection of a window. They were not Belgian police. They were looking for someone specific. Had Gilbert been followed? Had the dead drop been compromised? Levin felt a cold dread. He had the intelligence, but he was trapped. His own emergency protocol was clear. In case of suspected surveillance, do not use electronic communication. Do not return to your safe house. Go to ground. He had to get the message to Tel Aviv, but he also had to disappear. He waited for 15 minutes that felt like 15 years. One of the men approached the shelf where he had found the book. He ran his hand along the spines. He was checking the drop site. Levin knew he had only seconds. He stood up, left the art book on the table, and walked towards the emergency exit at the back of the library. He didn't look back. He pushed the bar and stepped into a grimy back alley, melting into the city. He had escaped, but his network was blown. Gilbert was likely captured or dead, and Levin was now a ghost, unable to communicate the most vital piece of intelligence he had ever gathered. The operation to stop the hijacking before it began had failed. The genesis of Operation Isotope was this failure. The clock was now ticking. Phase 2. The foundation. Levin made his way to a prearranged emergency contact point, a coin-operated laundromat in the working-class neighborhood of Anderlecht. Taped with industrial adhesive to the underside of the third dryer from the left was a small magnetic box containing a single Belgian franc and a phone number written on waterproof paper. The number was for a specific public payphone in Amsterdam. It was a one-time use, emergency-only link designed to be untraceable. He called the number. A voice answered with a single, pre-arranged code word: sunrise. Levin responded with his own: sunset. He relayed the intelligence in clipped, precise Hebrew, stripped of all emotion. Sabina 571 tomorrow, May 8th. Origin Brussels, target Vienna. 4 subjects, 2 male, 2 female. Confirmed explosives. My network is compromised. Asset Gilbert is dark. I am under surveillance. Going to ground? Out. He hung up the phone and dropped it, letting it swing on its steel cord. His part of the operation was over. In Tel Aviv, the message landed like a grenade in the early morning hours at Mossad headquarters. A crisis meeting was convened at the Kiryat, the IDF's sprawling headquarters complex. In attendance were Prime Minister Golda Meir, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, Mossad Director Zvi Zamir, and Chief of Staff David Elazar. The options were grim. They could warn the Belgian authorities, but that would expose their intelligence sources and risk a diplomatic incident. The Belgians might cancel the flight, but the cell would simply regroup and choose another target, perhaps one they would have no warning for. They could try to have Austrian security intercept the hijackers during the Vienna stopover, but the risk of a public firefight in a crowded civilian airport was unacceptably high. Golda Meir, a woman who projected an image of an unflappable grandmother but possessed a will of forged steel, listened to the arguments and then made the decision. "Let them take the plane," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The room was stunned into silence. Her logic was cold, brutal, and calculated. If they take it, they will fly it to an Arab country like Libya, and the passengers will be hostages for months. Or they will fly it here, to Lod. They will do this because they believe we will negotiate. They believe they can humiliate us on our own soil. Let them come. We will deal with them here. It was a staggering risk. She was betting the lives of nearly 100 civilians on the ability of Sayeret Matkal to perform a surgical rescue operation that had never been attempted before. The plan was now in motion. Ehud Barak was summoned. He and his team were put on full alert. The wooden mock-up of the 707 was reassembled. Among the squad leaders drilling with renewed, grim intensity was Benjamin Netanyahu. He was young, but already a veteran of several cross-border operations. A few months earlier, on a cold night in the Jordan Valley, his 4-man team was tasked with ambushing a squad of Fatah infiltrators. They had laid in wait for 18 hours, motionless in a dry wadi, the smell of dust and wild sage thick in the air. The targets appeared just before dawn, moving with confidence. The plan was to let them pass and engage them from the rear. But the lead militant stopped, sensing something was wrong. He unslung his AK-47. Netanyahu, the point man, didn't wait for an order. He knew the moment of maximum advantage was evaporating. He rose from concealment and fired 2 rounds from his suppressed Uzi, a precise, controlled burst that dropped the leader instantly. The ensuing firefight was over in seconds. It was that ability to recognize the critical, fleeting moment of action, the instinct to seize the initiative, that had marked him for leadership within the unit. It was the same quality Barak saw in himself. As Matkal drilled, the larger strategic picture deteriorated. Just as Levin's warning came in, the PFLP cell in Rome detonated a small explosive device in a luggage locker at Leonardo da Vinci Fiumicino Airport. It was a minor attack, causing few injuries, but it threw European airport security into chaos. Security was heightened everywhere, making it impossible for Mossad to exfiltrate the now hunted Levin from Brussels. He was on his own. Simultaneously, military intelligence reported that 2 full Syrian tank brigades were moving out of their garrisons near Damascus and redeploying towards the Golan Heights. It was likely a bluff, a political signal from Hafez al-Assad, but it couldn't be ignored. The Israeli Air Force was forced to divert its primary reconnaissance flights and drone assets to the northern border, leaving the crisis team at Lod with only satellite imagery and whatever they could see from the control tower. They were fighting a war on 3 fronts, and their resources were stretched to the breaking point. The technology for the operation was prepared by Unit 81, Mossad's Directorate for Technical Operations. The head of the unit was a brilliant electronics engineer named Miriam Eshkol. Eshkol was a prodigy, recruited out of the Technion University. She had designed the listening devices used to bug the Egyptian General Staff's offices in the lead-up to the Six-Day War. For this operation, she had 2 key pieces of equipment. The first was a set of ultra-sensitive seismic stethoscopes. Each unit contained a piezoelectric crystal transducer that converted minute physical vibrations into electrical signals, which were then amplified and transmitted. In theory, they could pick up the vibrations of conversations and footsteps inside, allowing analysts to build a map of the hijackers' locations. Their critical limitation was that they were highly susceptible to ambient noise. An active airport tarmac was the worst possible environment. The second piece of tech was the secure communication system. The team needed to communicate with each other and with the command post, but their radio signals could not be picked up by the hijackers, who would be monitoring air traffic control frequencies. Eshkol's team modified a series of small, short-range ANPRC-64 radios to operate on an obscure VHF frequency allocated for meteorological balloon telemetry. It was a frequency no one would think to monitor. On the evening of May 8th, Sabina Flight 571 took off from Brussels. As Levin had warned, 4 passengers boarded at the last minute. Ali Taha Abu Snina and another male hijacker, plus 2 female accomplices, Therese Halsa and Rima Tanis. Shortly after the plane left Vienna, they made their move. They stormed the cockpit, brandishing their pistols and revealing the explosive belts. The pilot, Captain Reginald Levy, a British national and a decorated veteran of the Royal Air Force, remained preternaturally calm. He got on the radio and spoke the words the world was coming to dread. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Sabina 571, we have been hijacked." The hijackers demanded to be flown to Tel Aviv. As Golda Meir had predicted, their plan was to land at Lod and make their demands. Captain Levy, a Jew himself, understood the grave implications. He also knew his passengers were in mortal danger. He began a quiet, methodical act of sabotage. He spoke to the hijackers, feigning cooperation, while subtly trying to gather information. He engaged Snina in conversation, complimenting his planning, trying to gauge his state of mind and build a fragile rapport. This small act would have enormous consequences. The plane landed at Lod Airport just after 5 p.m. on May 9th. It was immediately directed by the tower to a remote, isolated hardstand, a kilometer from the main terminal. The airport was shut down. A security perimeter was established. The trap was set. Phase 3, the core. The first major setback occurred just after nightfall. With the initial negotiations underway, Barak needed fresh intelligence. The pre-mission file was now hours old. People move. He dispatched Danny Yatom, another young officer in the unit, to lead a 2-man intelligence team on a preliminary surveillance mission. Their objective was to crawl across 300 meters of open tarmac, attach Miriam Eshkol's seismic stethoscopes to the fuselage near the forward landing gear, and retreat. The devices, in theory, would transmit the vibrations of footsteps and voices, allowing analysts in the command post to create a real-time map of the hijackers' movements. Yatom and his partner, dressed in black, moved with agonizing slowness, using the faint shadows of parked baggage carts for cover. The night was clear, the moon a damningly bright crescent. They were 200 meters from the plane when a perimeter guard, a reservist jumpy and not fully briefed on the covert operation, saw movement in the shadows. He followed his training, raising his rifle and firing a single warning shot into the air. The crack of the rifle echoed across the silent airport. The mission was instantly, catastrophically compromised. From the cockpit of the 707, Snina saw the muzzle flash. His voice erupted over the radio, screaming threats, convinced he was about to be stormed. Yatom and his partner froze, then began a desperate, low crawl back towards the terminal buildings, expecting a second shot at any moment. The perimeter guards, now on high alert, began sweeping the tarmac with searchlights. The two Matkal operators were caught, forced to take cover in a concrete drainage culvert, the smell of jet fuel and stagnant water filling their nostrils. For a full hour, they remained trapped as the searchlights played over their position, reporting their status in whispered bursts over their radios. The intelligence-gathering mission had failed. They were now completely blind. Panic began to set in at the command post. Mossad, a man known for his decisive, often reckless confidence,